So we basically won't be taking too much time. So somebody has to switch off the. We won't waste too much time doing this. This is what has been put in your MA syllabus as the Americans call it interpretive. Though very rarely there is a theory tagged with either interpretative or interpretive. Both the forms are acceptable. The Americans will tell you that interpretative is something which is in the nature of an archaic pronunciation, a completely old pronunciation, which is not true at all. Interpretative is the way it is. For example, uh, indulge me for a minute exactly. Um, the Americans will say disoriented. Okay, you say I felt all disoriented. We say that in India as well. The British way of saying that is disorientated. You'll say I'm feeling disorientated. So there are these small differences of American English and like I told you, these days people are even uh, accepting uh, the whole idea of even in Indian English, which includes both a different way of using syntax. Like, for example, Americans don't say, we would say in India that yesterday I met so and so. The Americans will say, yesterday I met with so and so. And if you want to know where somebody is, we generally ask, where are you? The Americans will say, where are you at? Which is plain bad English. But it has become accepted. My very sincere appeal to all of you is not to imbibe these things. Okay, where are you at? And things like that. I met with. You don't meet somebody with, unless you're saying, I met so and so along with my brother. If you say it like that, then it's a different issue. But met with is completely meaningless. The syntax is wrong. Okay, so what is this hermeneutics? let's try to understand this. Now, there are two pronunciations of hermeneutics itself. One is the way I am pronouncing it, hermeneutics, right? And that is the Greek way of pronouncing it, because this is a Greek word. It basically came from the Greek word Hermes, Hermes. Now, there are legends, and by that what I mean is there are stories which are unsubstantiated, or perhaps one can even call them stories which are apocryphal, meaning that the 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 value of that story is doubtful. The validity, sorry, what am I saying, is doubtful. One thing is for sure, it has come from the name Hermes. Now, there are different interpretations of Hermes. Some say that Hermes was a demigod. Sorry. Some say that Hermes was a demigod. Some people even say there was a god, Hermes, and it is from the name of the god or the demigod that Hermes, that hermeneutics comes in. If you look at another story that says Hermes was a messenger who was tasked with the uh, um, with with this work of carrying a message to someone by someone. We don't know who told this Hermes to take a message and deliver it to whom. We don't know about that. But apparently, this Hermes, there was no written communication, it was an oral communication. He was instructed to go and tell something to someone. And in doing that, in basically tell, conveying the message orally, Hermes made a mistake of sorts. So the message was not what it was supposed to be, it became something else. So that is one story that goes around. So which of these is true? I don't know. I doubt if there are, unless there is some great Greek scholar or scholar of the history of Greece and the language of the Greeks, because there are different forms of Greek. This is supposed to come from Attic Greek. Attica is a province. So we don't really know which of these stories is correct. But what is for sure is that hermeneutics is that which concerns itself with understanding through interpretation. Okay, ultimately that is what it became for the Greeks. Okay, hermeneutics became there is historical evidence to suggest that scholars of antiquity have used hermeneutics in order to get a correct understanding of a text of their ancestors from the time of their ancestors, old texts, half texts, like for example, Parmenides is the poem that is in fragments, bits and pieces, not today, even in his own time. So that was something that was interpreted in different ways by different people, including Plato. And these people were trying to understand what is what about Parmenides is the poem. Similarly, if you look at Zeno of Elias, uh, later writings, where he cryptically tried to uh, preserve the knowledge of Parmenides, you will find that he took recourse to various diagrams, pictograms as they are sometimes called, uh, so that people only those people who could understand that pictogram or a diagram would be able to understand it. So that is how he made it a bit cryptic, so that people don't uh, oppose something because they don't understand it and destroy the work. Okay, so that is how the word hermeneutic or hermeneutics in plural, it comes into being. Now you'll find another pronunciation which is hermeneutic. Okay, and this is a German pronunciation, because you will see that the history of hermeneutics is that it disappears for a few centuries from the vocabulary of any European languages, and it makes a comeback in the 19th century, technically, and people who started using it originally were literary critics, and the non-German literary critics were the ones who kept calling it hermeneutic. But once it went into the hands of the Germans, then they changed the pronunciation as per the rules of their um syntax, which is EU is pronounced oi. So I have once told you in the past when I mentioned the news agency, the world famous news agency, Reuters, Reuters. Uh, it is pronounced not Reuters, but it is Reuters because it's a German agency. So when hermeneutics went into Germany, it didn't go through literary criticism. That was not the main way in which it found its way into uh, Germany. It found its way into Germany basically through the whole idea of history, understanding history. So when people were consciously trying to understand history, and later on, when they started talking about the human sciences, which one again has to be very careful because there is a certain expression to which I shall get to in a couple of minutes that is used, and that is very loosely translated as uh, science of the mind. Then it is translated as science of history, while some others translate that expression into spiritual knowledge, which of course is again beset with problems because the word spirituality can be understood in different ways and in different senses. Uh, so we'll start looking at hermeneutics when it entered the realm of humanities is a word that we can use safely, or human sciences also perhaps is something that can be used. Human sciences or humanities, those can be talked about. In fact, the Germans didn't talk about these things as sciences in the plural. They were talking about it in the singular. Okay, so it would be human science or social science, and for various reasons, which I shall come to at some point when we're doing this whole thing, you will find that the idea of a social science found rejection. It basically found a rejection in the German tradition. They were initially and for a very long time not for talking about these as many. They wanted to call it a single science. And if you remember what I said about Herder yesterday, uh, he was somebody who basically wanted to create a certain science of understanding through language and through semiotics, which is the study of symbols and signs, and how that is also integrated into language. So you'll see that Herder dabbled in a number of ideas, technically speaking, never completed any of the ideas. It was left to his posterity, and his posterity took up his particular ideas in conjunction. When I say his posterity, it's German posterity. They took it up in conjunction with the work of Vico, which is a lot more cohesive, and his Scienza Nuovo. Okay, so you can therefore say that these people already had a component of the hermeneutic in their thinking, one in a better form than the other. Giambattista Vico actually finished all his ideas, didn't leave them at in half. Whereas with Herder, we find that most of the ideas, sorry, most of the ideas that he started started off with, he basically didn't finish them. By that we mean didn't take them to the logical end. In a way, it was perhaps a good thing because it was this aspect of Herder that galvanized uh, subsequent generations to take a look at all the things that he was saying, and he was how he was introducing those ideas. They took that into consideration and put out their own version of these ideas. So later on in the 20th century, uh, the especially with Martin Heidegger and with Hans Gadamer, we find that there is less of a resistance to the idea of a social science as well. Initially, there was a great deal of resistance. People didn't want to call it a social science, especially the person that we will be talking about shortly, Wilhelm Dilthey. Dilthey was somebody who uh, didn't care too much for the idea of social science. And you will know very soon as to why that thing happened. Now, You must also remember that uh, while translating from German into English, there are problems because some translations call the word Geist, which is central to the understanding of hermeneutics. This is the word. And sorry about that. Um, the word Geist has been translated as mind, which I don't think is appropriate. It should be translated into spirit. Okay. And the word Geist came into hermeneutics thanks mainly to well, I'm writing his name for the first time, so let me write it in more full. It came in through the works of Wilhelm Dilthey. And Dilthey was influenced positively by Hegel. And that is the reason why you will find the word Geist prominently being used by uh, Wilhelm Dilthey. And you can also call him the architect of modern hermeneutics. You can call him the probably the first person in the modern period to consciously, because now with the wisdom of hindsight, people also say that writers like Schleiermacher, Herder, people do say that he was also somebody who used hermeneutics, but that is with the wisdom of hindsight. And Schleiermacher, his hermeneutics came into light thanks to Dilthey. Okay, and Dilthey basically would uh, talk about Schleiermacher both negatively and also positively. He says there are some things in him which need to be, uh, appreciated, but he also says that he's too simplistic in his understanding and in the application of the hermeneutics. So that is how the whole thing came into the modern period. But please remember that it was not just the Greeks who used hermeneutics. It was also done by the Christian scholars, or they should be technically called the Christian scholastics. They used hermeneutics extensively in order to try and see which is the most appropriate interpretation of what is written in the Bible. And therefore, the Christian scholastics' form of hermeneutics is simply called biblical hermeneutics. It's called biblical hermeneutics. And again, through hindsight, I told you that Herder briefly became a clergyman. He thought you could have a unified perception of what the world is. And since he talked about all those things, uh, Herder is now called he's called a biblical hermeneutic thinker, and as well as a historian who used hermeneutics. But all this is in hindsight. Nobody called him this while he was alive. Again, perhaps the credit should go to Wilhelm Dilthey. And Dilthey is the one who used this word consciously. It's not like somebody else uh, gave this word there. It isn't that. So let's get into the modern 19th and 20th century. First, the 19th, and later the 20th century uh, hermeneutics. You must understand this Geist thing. I told you that it is translated as mind or spirit. Uh, well, one request here, there'll be a lot of German expressions, which is inevitable because despite the great disrepute the language had as guttural and all that, it is among all the European languages one of the most uh, versatile and uses different words in different ways. Okay, and therefore, and those subtle nuances do not get covered by English words. English usually has, at one time, it went up to 10, then 2 people have come back. So people are leaving already. I wonder if it's really worth doing this.
Sir, what is meant by versatile and subtle nuances?
Versatile is something that lends itself to many applications. and it lends itself. And in the case of language, a versatile language has, uh, you know, different words for a
Versatile actor.
for a, yeah, but in the case of language, it is something which will tell you that it has, if there is nuances, the technical meaning of a nuance is a bend or something which is in the nature either of a depression or in the nature of a swelling. So that all those words that can capture, if the language has words that can capture all those, then it is called a versatile language. Nuances are the subtleties, subtle differences. They're not obvious, in your face differences. It's not black, white, not even gray.
Small differences.
Hmm?
Small differences.
Yeah, but they're not just small differences, they're minute differences, but they can change the meaning of something completely. They can change the meaning of something completely. And that is the reason why uh, you have to respect, among the European languages, you have to respect German for that. Okay, now when we look at hermeneutics in the context of uh, the German language, you have this thing called, a concept called we have to start our understanding of this whole thing with this particular word, which is pronounced Geistesgeschichte. Okay, Geistesgeschichte, and this particular word is something that, if we translate into English, you can't find one word for it. You have to explain it in a sentence, and that will be a concept of the history of ideas and the history of ideas with a built, let's see if it'll fit, built-in concept of, sorry, built-in context of culture. That is what Geistesgeschichte will mean. Okay, that it's a concept of the history of ideas with a built-in concept of culture, which is very close to what Herder was saying when he said that any language, when it emerges in a cultural context with shared meanings attributed to words and ideas. Otherwise, you can't have language. Okay? And that is precisely the uh, concept that we see in Geistes Gestichte. Geistesgeschichte means exactly that. You have to know the history of an idea, not just of an idea, history of an idea as in when it was born and all that, not just that. You have to know about the idea, how it came into being, and what was the context, the cultural context that threw that idea up. And please remember, culture here do not equate with fine arts, with music, dance. Culture is, as I told you before, a putting together of human activities which are, what should I say, uh, which are social, economic, and political. So that is the most important thing. So when we talk about a context of culture, we're also talking about the social, we're talking about the economic and the political and any other variable which is used only in the context of human civilization and that which is extra natural. By saying extra natural, what we are actually saying is that it is no longer in nature. Because anything that we are, when we say they are a cultured family, those people who live in harmony with nature don't have practices of culture deeply ingrained in them. The more alienated you are from nature, the more cultured you become. Okay, that is the thesis that is forwarded by Eric Fromm and by Herbert Marcuse. You start becoming more and more cultured when you also start becoming less and less of a natural human being. When you're no longer a natural, when you're not so much in harmony with nature. Okay, so that becomes culture. Unless specified, if culture is being used in some other form, then it is the duty of the author, or let's say in my case, if I'm while teaching you, I'm using culture not in this form, then I'll have to specify that this is not the usage of culture. This is not the regular usage of culture or cultural. It is something that is used in this particular manner. This is being used in this particular manner, in this particular context. So that becomes a certain kind of a caveat that you place. So if we are talking about Geistesgeschichte, uh, then we are talking about an entire history of ideas with a built-in context of culture. Now, there is another word that uh, we have to understand, because please remember that this whole idea of what we are calling um, hermeneutics has derived itself directly against positivism. It has recreated a system of knowledge which just junks. That is the only word that I can think of. Uh, it junks the whole notion of the positivist vocabulary. So, one of the things that it proclaims itself as being against, okay, is it says it's against facticitat. Facticitat, the A should have those two uh, dots on top. What does facticitat get translated into English? It gets translated either as facticity or factual. Facticitat and facticity are very close uh, in terms of even the pronunciation. Okay, uh, factual. Now, when we talk about facticitat, this was put first, it was the word facticitat was again put forth by Johann Fichte. And according to Fichte, facticitat is simply facts. Okay? It simply becomes facts. When we talk about facticitat in the Fichte system of knowledge. Okay, so when it becomes a fact as such, then that is very close to the positivist notion of fact, which will become uh, it will become, what should I say? It'll become consistent with that separation of facts and values, right? So you'll find that this particular idea of Fichte was abandoned. And if you actually look at how it is understood uh, by people like Dilthey, okay, Dilthey had a completely different understanding, or he generated a completely different understanding of facticitat. For him, it is a for Dilthey. What am I doing? Facticity is a contrast to ideas. So you can call it binary thinking if you want. Okay, if you want, you can call it a binary thinking, a binary way of understanding things. But in the binary, he is saying that facticity is the opposite of ideas. Okay, so there is no idea in a fact, is what he basically says. And that is how he mounts a critique against Johann Fichte. Then there is another binary that is created by Habermas. And Habermas basically distinguishes between facti. What is the matter? He distinguishes between these two words, factisitat. Uh, oh, this is and Geltung. So what does he mean by that? Okay, he is saying the distinguishing is between facts and norms. This particular binary, I'm sorry, is a little more closer to Fichte's idea of a fact. Uh, because of the Marxist influence on early Habermas. This was the early Habermas who distinguished between Factisitat and Geltung. Geltung became norms, which is as good as values. So at that point, he was basically subscribing to the positivist kind of belief. Later on, he changed. And by the time he became a proponent of the idea of what should we call the life world, as he calls it, he begins to see norms as being moral compunctions, and because of their being moral compunctions, he sees them as being important, and he doesn't believe that there can be facts which are purely facts, which do not have some kind of normative bias, like, for example, a normative basis, not a bias. The body temperature, normal body temperature being 98.6, or the normal blood pressure reading being 120 systole by 80 diastole. Today we see them as facts, but are they facts? How did you establish that these are normal? Okay, that is what Michel Foucault will ask you. How do you say something is normal? Therein lies your understanding of the word norm. You have put a thermometer into the mouths of several people, and you have taken a certain number of readings from a certain number of people, and 98.4 or 98.6 was considered to be normal. Now they don't use 98.4, they now only use 98.6 as a normal reading. So it's a norm. It is a norm. And you will see most of medicine is based in norms, though it is called a science. Blood pressure, you take a number of readings. You take a number of readings from number of people, and then you take the average out. And then you say 120 by 80 is the normal reading. But is there something which tells you that, look, this is normal, okay? Your heart doesn't tell you, I'm pumping blood at this rate, so this is normal. It is our interpretation, which is what the hermeneutic is. So later on, Habermas realized that to stick to facticitat was not going to generate any results. You have to understand the practices behind the norms. You have to understand the beliefs behind the norms. And it's only when you do that that you get true knowledge. That is the kind of thing he talks about in his later life and in the life world that he talks about.
Sir,
So, yes,
all this we can apply to every field and every subject, like the distinction between facts and norms and this study.
uh, you mean, can we apply the distinction between facts and norms?
Yes, sir. Means how to study.
How to study?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
the ways of different interpretations.
yes,
We can apply it into, like, for example, medicine, like chemistry, politics.
yes, yes.
Right.
It is that. See, even in medicine, at one time, it was talking about blood pressure. At one time, people said, if you're over the age of 35, and if your systole is 140, and if your diastole is 90, then it is fine. It's a normal reading. And I think I told you once, Gandhi had a blood pressure of 220 by something, 220 by 150 or something like that. Didn't take a tablet. Didn't take a tablet, lived into his 80s, didn't die of natural causes. He was shot dead. He was shot dead. So that is so many times, in fact, I think you might have faced it. While we are caught up in this COVID thing, something that we don't understand very clearly. What is a fact? What is a fact here? A fact that presents itself as a fact. We are now in the process of yeah, uh, we are now in the process of actually establishing what is it that will be normal. The whole, some time ago, the whole world was abuzz with this phrase, the new normal. So if the normal is the normal, then there is nothing new, there's nothing old. It's got to be timeless. It has to be timeless. But is it timeless? It is not. That's why people are saying new normal. Okay? That's why people are saying new normal. And if you understand, at one point, the same inductive kind of a thing led to 140 by 90 being a normal reading for a person above 35 years of age. And even 150 by 100 was okay for a person who was above 55 years of age. Okay, that is what it was. Then the big pharma companies saw an opportunity here. This is American capitalism at work. What did they do? They prescribed that irrespective of the age, you have to have 120 by 80 as your normal blood pressure. Even 130 by 80 is not acceptable. Even 130 by 80 is not acceptable. So, obviously, as you're aging, the readings go up. In most people, the readings go up. So, you start giving them blood pressure maintenance drugs. Sometimes you can get, if you're feeling anxious about something, you can get a temporary rise in your blood pressure. You can get a temporary rise. Some doctors are so intimidating that the moment you look at them, your blood pressure goes up. And a friend of mine has this problem. The moment he sees a BP apparatus, his blood pressure goes up. And you have to medicate him. You don't take several readings at different times of the day, which is what you're supposed to do. You don't do that. Okay, and so what happens? You are establishing new normals. And that is at the instance of the big pharmaceutical companies, Merck, Sanofi, all these companies. Same thing happened with diabetes. I don't know if I told you this. Till 1997, fasting blood sugar reading of 140 was considered to be normal. And postprandial, after you've eaten something, blood sugar levels were considered to be normal up to 200, up to 1997. Then suddenly everything changed. They said if you are 180 to 200, you're pre-diabetic. If you are 126 up to 126, you're pre-diabetic. Now, if you get a reading above 160, you are diabetic, not even pre-diabetic anymore. Above 160 postprandial, you're diabetic. Above 110, if you're basically show a reading above 110 on your fasting blood sugar level, then you're diabetic, not even a pre-diabetic. So they'll give you metformin. So I tried out one thing upon myself. I'm severely diabetic, so it's not such a big thing. But I wanted to check this out because the medicine that is uniformly given to these what are now being called borderline diabetics, okay, they are given medicines which has metformin. And if you're severely diabetic, like I am, then you also have to take other tablets. So I take amisulpride and I take Voglibose. But one day I decided, let us see what metformin does. So one day I didn't eat anything and took 1000 mg of my metformin dose in the morning on an empty stomach. Nothing happened. Technically, 1000 mg of metformin should make me hypoglycemic. It should bring down, when I haven't eaten anything, it should bring down my blood sugar levels below normal. And when I was taking a tablet called glibenclamide, that used to bring my blood sugar levels down below normal. Even if I ate, if I didn't eat enough, it would bring it down. So I always carried something with me. So I said, let me try now one day without eating, without metformin, let me take Voglibose. I became hypoglycemic. I became hypoglycemic. Then I took amisulpride. No, not amisulpride, sorry. What am I saying? It is glimepiride. Glimepiride, I took that 3 mg. Within 1 hour, I became hypoglycemic. So you can see that people are prescribed medicines. This is big pharma which is going to declare what is normal, what is not normal. That is capitalist industry. And it will give you metformin because it's a safe drug. It is a safe drug. It's not like glimepiride or glibenclamide or like voglibose, which will bring your blood sugars down. And people take this when they don't need it. And in the name of reducing blood pressure, they also give you beta blockers. At one time, the medicine was propranolol. Now it has become metoprolol. And metoprolol is something that basically, what should I say? It is something that basically brings down your heart rate, your pulse rate. So all these can be applied anywhere. Facticity in the Dilthayan sense of the term. Facticity in the Dilthayan sense of the term is something that can be applied anywhere. It is a contrast to an idea. It is apocryphal. And Habermas has declared his preference now for Geltung and not for Factizat, Factizitat. Sorry. So it can be applied to any field of knowledge. It can be, no doubt about that.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
you're satisfied with my long-winded explanation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. Now, then in this whole scheme of German hermeneutics, where people will talk about even norms, okay, you have this particular term, Weltanschauungen. Okay, what does Weltanschauungen mean? It means that not that, sorry, a world view generated by the cultural mind. That is Weltanschauungen. So the German hermeneutics basically ask you to be sensitive to this, to be very, very sensitive to this. Okay, because there are some practices which are normal in certain cultures, but there are certain other practices that are not considered normal in other worldviews. I mean, the same set of practices. Like, for example, shaking of hands and all those things which has been brought to us by the Europeans. But if you meet a Japanese, okay, I am a bit of a consultant for the Japanese, what should I say, consul general, Japanese consul general, and I was told that when you meet Japanese, first and foremost, you should bow from your waist and you should not make continuous eye contact when you talk to them. And you have to say san at the end of the name. It's like the Telugu Garu. You have to say san. So you see that these are all cultural practices. And Weltanschauung or Weltanschauungen is one form of Weltanschauung, is a worldview that is followed by a cultural mind. A cultural mind is a mind that has been cultured in a certain fashion. And how is it cultured? It is cultured by the atmosphere, not the atmosphere of the natural variety, but atmosphere in which we people live. So if you do that, then what you are doing is that you're generating a cultural mind. Okay? And when a cultural mind comes into being, if you don't belong to that context, you have to understand that particular context. That is the meaning of Weltanschauungen. You don't have to say Schaungen. Even if you say Schaung and stop there, it's enough. You don't have to say Schaungen. That's good enough. Now, let me say that Dilthey says that whether you're trying to understand a contemporary of yours in temporal terms, meaning contemporary from the same time, but another culture, then please understand their worldview. The worldview here is not the Marxist technical ideological worldview. That is not what we are talking about. How they look at the world. The simple, very, very simple form of worldview. Not all that complicated ideological stuff. Okay? So try to understand their culture. That is what Dilthey would say. So that's why, and he's not the only one. There are several people in Germany before him and after him who have used it. And there is a hermeneutic school of psychology which emphasizes on Weltanschauung or Weltanschauungen if you prefer. So that is one of the things. And I would like to end today's class by making 2 points. Will you give me a couple of minutes?
Yes, sir.
Just 2 points and I'll end this class. That should be there. This also should be there, which shouldn't be there. Let's see if we can fit things here. Someone like Dilthey is not a great fan of Immanuel Kant. Okay, because implicit in this whole thing, Weltanschauung and all this, is the fact that you have to understand the other the way that a person wants to be understood. Okay, if I say, please, I'm doing this for a reason, please understand that, then what am I saying? I'm saying, please understand me for what I'm trying to do. So it is also an imploring that please understand me for what I am saying. Don't twist the meaning. Don't read meanings into it. All those things are implied. So when he talks about understanding, he's an idealist, obviously, because I told you, he contrasts ideas with facts and says facts are nonsense, ideas are what matters. Now, Kant is also an idealist. There's no doubt about that. But Dilthey is actually critical of the Kantian idealism. Idealism here is giving primacy to ideas, the way we did it in Plato. Okay, not necessarily as being born with ideas in our head, but giving primacy to ideas, not to material facts. So some people construct a philosophical thinking based on ideas, okay, not on the basis of material facts. So what is Kantian idealism? For Dilthey, Kantian idealism is subjective idealism. Okay, Kant emphasizes free will. We have talked enough of this, so I don't think you need me to talk more about it. Now, the interpretation of subjective idealism and free will by Wilhelm Dilthey will basically say that subjective idealism and free will are, how do I put that sentence? They have the, let's put it this way, they have the effect of detaching a person from nature. Okay, it detaches a person from nature, and Kant's idea of understanding borders on what is the German Vorstellung. And what does Vorstellung mean? It means a prior perception, of an object or a mental image of that object, and uh, it is not a real perception of the object. This is what free will does, according to uh, Dilthey. And he says this is subjective idealism, wherein you are looking at this kind of understanding, Vorstellung, where you already have a prior perception of an object or a mental image of that object, and that perception is inaccurate because it has very little to do with the real object that you're supposed to deal with. It doesn't deal with the real object, it deals with the prior perception of that object. It actually does that. So that is what is the point, that, and this kind of understanding for Dilthey is not a proper understanding. And he says that is the reason why Kant keeps positing, he keeps positing antinomies by drawing a linear view of the world. He keeps drawing antinomies. So he's not a big fan of Kant, but he is quite a fan of Hegel. Okay, not just Hegel, even of Spinoza. Benedictus Spinoza is what some people call him. And Benedictus Spinoza, or Baruch, Baruch, Baruch Spinoza. Okay, but I'll just write Spinoza. We'll decide later what to call him, Benedictus or Baruch or Baruch. I don't know. Spinoza and Hegel. He says these people have objective idealism, and therefore they are at all times conscious of their being in harmony with nature. Now, this objective realism, this word has come back. It's going to bite us shortly. The way in which good friend Dilthey uses objective idealism is very different from the positivist view of that which is objective. The subjective idealism is also that which is very different from the positivist idea of the subject. So I'll stop here today. Now let me ask you one thing. See, this class I'm going to put as MA Arts College class, okay? Because this is a part of the syllabus. And madam, you'll have to do the honors once I load the video upload it. I'll put the link and put it there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that is point number one. This will go as an arts college class. The second point that I want to, second thing I want to ask you, will you permit me tomorrow evening? I'm not taking a class because of the fact that there is a MotoGP weekend. Tomorrow they'll be qualifying, and day after tomorrow there'll be the actual race. So tomorrow evening I'll be occupied with that. Whenever there is racing, then there'll be no class. I am madly hooked, especially to MotoGP. Okay. So since we finished with roles today, and instead of starting, and this is anyway a part of your Western political thought thing, right? So uh, the interpretative theory, that part of it. So tomorrow shall we continue with this and finish at least Wilhelm Dilthey? And on Monday morning, get back to the ideology class.
You said that you will take a libertarian theory.
Yeah, that I'll do on Monday.
Okay, sir.
Instead of leaving this halfway here now, I have not finished this. So I'll finish this tomorrow in the morning. Libertarianism, I'm yet to begin, so we might as well do it on Monday morning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good idea.
Yeah. So there'll be continuity. Otherwise, there'll be a 2-day break in this. So tomorrow I can finish off Dilthey. And on Monday evening, I can take Kadama. I think that makes sense, at least to me.
Okay, sir.
Akshay is not very happy.
No, sir.
Mm.
Sir, I
Okay,
want to pass a observation.
please.
All facts are ideas, but all ideas are not facts.
All facts are ideas,
But
and
all
all ideas are not facts. All facts are ideas. Yes, they started off as ideas, and they continue to also perhaps exist as ideas, even though they have attained some kind of factual or facticity. But all ideas are not facts, yes. That is true.
Okay.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with that. It's fine. I have this idea. When I think of myself, I see myself as this nice, thin-looking fellow. No, that's not a fact. And don't trivialize it, huh? I'm telling you seriously. So we have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of ideas about a lot of people which are not sustained factually. Yeah, okay. I'll
Okay.
accept that. I think it's fine. Any more questions? Any more questions? No more? Okay. So thank you very much. So tomorrow we continue with this. Monday we start with libertarianism. And in the evening we do this on Monday. Not this. We do Gadamer. Tomorrow we finish off with Dilthey. Okay. And so this I'll be posting on your this thing, ma'am. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.